welcome. This was open to the public. I don't see anybody I don't recognize right now, but if you are joining us or you watch this at a later date, we're delighted that you have joined us. And I am going to go through the catalog. Some of you may already have gotten copies from Amazon where it's available at cost. You certainly don't need a copy. This will be available on the website and also on our private circle space. Certainly when you go back and look at this presentation, again, if you do that on our website or you use the link that we provide, at the bottom of the issue, which is the really robust site that we use for these presentations, there's a slide bar. And when you go back and look in more, if you're interested in going back and looking in more detail at the pieces that I'm talking about today, you can use that slider in order to enlarge the image, and it's really pretty remarkable, the detail that you can see that way if you are working in the issue program that we share. So here is the cover of the catalog for 2023. Many of you have probably already seen it. I can't remember whether we shared it. I have a feeling that we did. Wayne makes the final call for what looks best on the cover, not only in combination, but also how it will look in print. And so congratulations to the 3 artists who were included this time around. Here we have a list of the exhibition artists. I won't spend any time going through that since we're going to hit on it anyway. And if you come back and read through this, you're certainly welcome to read my intro. But essentially, what I'm saying is something I've been saying to you all year, which is that we're grateful for every single one of you, and we appreciate those of you who felt compelled to enter something this time around. And we always are very grateful for the fact that you work to get the photographs just right, because that makes such a difference. And then it would be, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Wayne, because of course he's the one who turned this all into the magic that we're going to see today. And Zena isn't involved specifically in this project, but she certainly keeps the boat floating all the time. First up is this piece from Zoe. And if you've studied Zoe or been following Zoe's work, you know that she's been working with Archetypes for a couple of years, maybe 3, maybe longer. I've lost track, but in any event, she uses herself as the model. She stages these pictures, and I can bring this up a little bit closer. If you look at the vest that she's wearing on the left, she actually crafted that vest from scratch and sewed on the keys. And the story of how she created that is quite remarkable. And I'm hoping that I can get her to share that story with us at some point in a future presentation. And up from Tricia, who works with found materials. And this is a beautiful example of an early self-portrait based on or inspired by her nature child, Tree Girl. And you will see here in the images that you're going to encounter today that lots of people work with mixed media sorts of things and then move over to digital in order to incorporate some of what they're working on. And so keep your eyes open for interesting combinations of printed backgrounds and then natural objects as she used here. Tracy Urban, and I apologize, Tracy, if you're here. I caught the typo in your title on the left there when I went through this morning. It was changed in the catalog that went to print. So, you know, there's always that one typo that just makes you, you know, grit your teeth, and there it is. But this is a piece that is a really, really powerful piece. Tracy shared it with us earlier in the year as part of the collages we were doing. The title is For One Brief Moment We Were Happy. And she's done a beautiful job of sharing an image top left there that represented a moment in time with her dad and a sister, and how that changed over time to the point where neither of them is alive now. So the work that people share can be poignant, it can be funny, it's all over the place, which that's part of what I think binds us together, because of the wonderful sensitivity and emotional aspect of many of the pieces that are created. Up from Teresa Martini, this sweet piece called A Peaceful Walk. She uses a lot of silk fusion and felting, and I love the title, A Peaceful Walk Until. I don't know whether that means until the little dog meets the cats that are there on the right or until the storm blows in. So it's nice to have a little ambiguity. Susan Smith's piece from the cover, this is a beautiful photograph that she took. She works with digital apps on both the iPad and in Photoshop. And then she's also taken advantage of printing at Spoonflower. And this is indeed a beautiful, beautiful combination of colors, not unlike a symphony being led by a conductor. And from Susan Serez, a wonderful piece inspired by the Nautilus and by the Fibonacci sequence. And here she has combined them with her own embroidery in a piece that is, again, we really spend a lot of time talking about what collages are and what mixed media is. And I think that those of us who have studied this year really have perhaps had our understanding of collage expanded, because you might not refer to this as a collage, but in fact, it qualifies. Beautiful combination of elements. And from Susan Lane, a piece that she worked and reworked numerous times using a combination of images that she pulled together digitally. This was the one that she settled on, and I loved what she said, that each of the combinations is a deliberate choice that brings the digital design to life in a unique way. And from Susan Gilliland, Susan participated very actively and created collages, I believe, every month over the course of, pardon me, 2023. Excuse me, and commented that after the war between Israel and Hamas began, some of her attention was pulled away from the subject matter that she had been drawn to in the past, and she's been very interested in creating pieces now that address peace and the very important aspects of what we need to do in order to work toward peace. And in this piece, she has highlighted an activist whose name is Mashhararawi. I hope I've pronounced that somewhat close, but this is someone who's really gone the distance in Palestine for her people. In an Instant from Sue Bates, a delightful piece and a wonderful poem that explains the entire impulse behind this piece. And note on her book, My Plans, My Goals. Safe inside my shell, making plans, the shell cracks, and everything changes. And from Sonia Lee Austin, delightful take on Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvius's ideal body. And she points out that da Vinci was inspired, or perhaps stole the image from Vitruvius. Now she has done the same. And why not turn this into a version that is a female or feminine version? And to top it off, she did this on a tea-dyed damask linen napkin, which seems very appropriate. It's a beautiful piece. And as is true with many of the pieces in this exhibition, proves the point that pieces don't have to be large. They don't have to be really big to be impressive, that sometimes the details or the impressiveness is in the details and in the thought behind the expression as well as the details. Cheryl is a nature child. Nature is her playground. It's a beautiful representation of gone to seed. And I do hope this is one you'll be able to zero in on and get a little bit closer so you can see not only the delightful background, but also the care that was taken to create the seed pods. Charla's specialty is a combination of things. She's a very gifted artist, known for her Zentangles, but also for this amazing photomontage work. And this is a beautiful piece that I could put words into describing it, but I think reading what she wrote with it is probably more appropriate. Kenya witnessed elephant migration, silent footsteps, endless foraging. Camera lens isolated, didactic, nanoseconds captured. Memory seared, the savannah, the life, the dry, the heat. the rain, the water, the sky, the sunset, the sunrise, the foliage, the color, the patterns, the creatures, the sounds. Spiritual awakening gifted, indelible imprint fused, soul permeated. And from Jean Hoskin, gorgeous example of the work she's been doing, combination of printing, Procreate, all kinds of digital collage elements. She's a master at this. This one combines two series. One is the opposites of complementary colors. And then in addition to that, she has included an iconic ornamental cabbage that she's used numerous times in previous pieces. And the result is extremely dynamic and colorful. And I love it because it's my favorite colors. From Sally Knoll, The Last Mangrove Forest. There is a great deal of interest in our membership in biodiversity and in protecting wildlife and trees and the natural environment. And this is a heartfelt plea, not only visually, but also in writing, to think and think and think and then do as an advocate for the world around us. And there's room for everything. There's room for everything creative. And so we have had these wonderful digital pieces. We've had stitched pieces so far, and we're only halfway through. And here's this wonderful oil over acrylic, just a small painting, humble about the things that are ripening in the garden. Beautiful piece from Penny about the first pick of a purple bean and early cherry tomatoes center stage on the windowsill. And then we take a turn with this piece from Paula that she was working on and perfecting over the course of the year, inspired by the Holocaust Shoe Memorial in Budapest, Hungary. 60 pairs of vintage shoes representing those who were transferred to Auschwitz and murdered there in 1945, including these darling two boys. And from Patty Six, wonderfully balanced and beautiful combination of low value primary colors. I really admire that with this black and white in the way that she has done it. And she talks at length in her statement about concentrating on the visual texture and shapes and lines and creating herself, expressing herself through art quilts. Pardon me. And this is a beautiful example of that. And from Pat Caffrey, wonderful. I tried to enlarge this and I still couldn't read very clearly the text that she's incorporated into the piece. So maybe at some point in the future, she'll send me that text and I can share it in one of our Monday emails or add it as an addendum to this. But she has gotten more and more in touch with archetypes over the past year and sees them as a strong influence in her life. And in that text on the left refers frequently to, "It is me, Pat. It is me, Pat." And what an affirmation is that? My editorial comment. And from Pam Lowe, I love this, Shapeshifter, former improvisational quilt maker, now in love with printmaking and painting and mixed media. She works all the time. She shares work with us so frequently and on Facebook. I'm in awe of her creative drive and talent. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Shapeshifter, the light side, the positive side of this particular archetype, it can gravitate to all kinds of different techniques and can do what she is doing in the moment and be totally drawn in and taken by it. From Orna Pascal, a beautiful piece that started with scraps from other people. And so here, not only has she created a grid, but in a sense, when I look at this piece, especially after having read her case study, I am reminded of community, because this piece wouldn't exist if she had not been part of a community that gave her scraps, and it would not have existed if she had not sat and sewed the circles onto the squares to create this piece that is a grid but is also certainly representative of a community. And from Nori, beautiful piece that started as a challenge. Everybody in the group got a length of fabric or a panel that was referred to, I guess the name of it was Fantasy Leaves. And her way of handling it, because she does have a wonderful engineer and she's incredibly creative, was to deconstruct that panel and then make it dimensional by adding deconstructed leaves, appliquing some of them, inserting wire form mesh into others, and jewelry wire in order to create the veins on some of the leaves so that they could be manipulated and shaped. And this is a wonderful three-dimensional result. And from Noelle, who's been working on a series about her archetypes for an extended period of time, I think over a year now, if I'm not mistaken. A really, really poignant and delightful visual representation in search of song. The artist loses herself in the rhythm and the heartbeat of the work. And Noelle has challenged herself to work simply and to work with a limited palette. And yet each of her pieces is incredibly complete and incredibly thought out, and clearly discerns the archetype in the presentation that she has put together. And from Nancy Knowles, a beautiful stitched piece that looks as though it's just a relic from some other shape or from other space is the word I meant, some other space or time, but in fact inspired by nature's effect on the world, revealed through weathered surfaces and slowly changed elements, speaking of ancient pasts. And so there you are. And she mentions divine stillness, and certainly when you look at these pieces or the detail, you have this sense of settling and being at peace. Nan Travers, wonderful three-dimensional piece, My Heart is Too Big for the Thief's Den. Some of these stories we won't ever know fully. I say that in the introduction to the exhibition. And I am always honored, feel a sense of honor and privilege when some of the story is shared, and that would be true for any number of the pieces in the exhibition. But in particular, this is an example of what happens when we feel as though someone has stolen parts of our heart or limited us in some way, and that in fact, all of the objects inside this little enclosure are related to that story. As a fiber artist, she has amassed a wealth of ability in a wealth of various techniques. And now her engineer is working out these boxes. And she says, My heart is too big for the thief's den has different items in all of the rooms, representative of a piece of my life that I let be stolen. But now the heart in the den is outgrowing the boundaries and shedding some of its golden bits as it forms new life. And from Megan, a beautiful, simple collage, haystack. And she says, making art helps me capture conscious and dream time wisdom. And this is painted and found papers, and a wonderful example of how some of what we create serendipitously without having a sense of where it will land comes together later. And she refers to it as the surprise of accidental beauty. And from Marilyn Waite, she has a poem that goes with this, just a brief one. Spinning plates, home, a place to make art embeds my inner and outer space, bursting forth in joys and struggles. So some of what is shared through the art and also through the accompanying text hints at the struggles underneath the surface that we may never know, but certainly universally we can connect with them. And the figure in this piece, it's worth noting, was inspired by Nikki de Saint-Fel and her Monumental Women series. If you go back and look her up, they were monumental. And this particular woman is based on that powerful image that de Saint-Fel created, and is spinning and keeping a number of plates in the air, which I think we can all relate to ourselves. And from Lynn Lee, another in her large series of quilts, all very colorful, abstract, vibrant interpretations of her feelings and her archetypes in some cases. This one is called Life is Full of Joy, and she references all of life's adventures and experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but the moments of true joy and contentment that we can embrace despite all of that. And from Lynn Wall, a wonderful piece referencing amoeba from pseudopods. And really, when you come through the catalog on your own, you'll want to read some of this text because the explanation is so helpful. But what she's really done here is to use her artistic license to look at how these tiny organisms work together to improve the environment. And so she's done a beautiful job of representing that in a very colorful, and if you look at all the stitching there, very intense way of putting it all together. And a whimsical piece with a deep message from Lynn Schmidt: abundance can follow you wherever you go. Her nature child archetype found joy in creating this collage, and the procrastinator left. And so she's got wonderful hats on her birds, you can see there on the right, and the wonderful duck popping out of the vessel on the left-hand side. And this is just a piece that makes us smile, and really, doesn't it make you think how fortunate we are to be artists and to be able to see the world in such playful and unique ways. From Linda Wingrove, who's also been working for at least 2 years, if not longer, according to my memory, on a series based on the archetypes, and her storyteller has come front and center on these pieces, which involve a lot of stitching and handwork and are all very telling in the elements that she's combined. Her cheetah represents her wild self, her higher self. And so here you can see Lynn bricking herself in. Hermit into the Desert of Isolation is the title of the piece, 7th in her series. And yet the cheetah is looking out over the mountains and at the sun, which is either setting or rising, I'm not sure which, and realizing that the gift of solitude is what we can appreciate when we have a hermit archetype and we allow ourselves to be introspective. Up from Lynn Bainbridge, who's been exploring painting. She's a writer. She has taught all kinds of things from transactional analysis to English in the past. She's been watching some of the 30-minute painting exercises with Louise Fletcher, who's an incredible inspiration. And this series of 6 is based on asemic writing, which is actually writing without meaning. And so anyone can explore this, and it's a wonderful way of getting expressive lines and adding to paintings. And these 6 hold so beautifully together, not only in terms of the lyrical quality of the lines, but also because of the colors. Lucy Snyder spent years working on liturgical pieces and working within church environments, and now translates a lot of those skills that she developed into personal pieces, including this one, Bound by Love. And I think that the words that have been added to the quilt say it all, that families are like quilts, woven together with smiles and tears, colored with memories, bound by love. And I can't help but think that that's also a way that we could describe how many of us feel about the creative strength training community. Lorraine studied with a number of well-known artists in the United States and also online. And this is a beautiful example of her digital work and also botanical printing. You can see the botanical printed image in the back, and she's juxtaposed it with a print or a picture that she took on the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina. And so this is just one more example of what artists are doing when they have this range of skills that they've mastered at layering and creating things and then printing them out on either fabric or paper, and sometimes then even stitching on them further. Sunset for Two from Lisa Larrabee, and she has really captured the sunset beautifully here. The coloring is exquisite, and she says clearly that dawn and dusk are her favorite times of day. And this attempt to capture the twilight, I think, is incredibly successful, Lisa. So good for you. Linda Dawson has explored probably almost every textile technique that is available and has mastered many of them. But this is maybe where she was heading all along. This is metallic embroidery thread. Short lesson in how this is created is she refers to it as parabolic paper stitching, and that means all the holes are placed or put into the paper, pierced into the paper in advance, and then the threads are sewn through those holes in order to create these amazing grids. And this particular one she has named Let Your Light So Shine. And another kind of shine from Laura Murray. Laura and I both have a love of the foils that were invented a number of years ago that can be used on fabric, and she's really the queen of using them. And so this is a beautiful example of silk and cotton and dye, but then with these metallic foils applied to the surfaces individually and maybe collectively. I don't know from looking, but it's such in person, this piece would just glow. And so I'm so glad that we could include it and that it could follow right after Linda Dawson's, because they're not really like each other at all. And yet they have so many references that are beautifully the same. And Lorianne Beeler has admitted in her statement that this is the result of having gone through a difficult time, and how we use the materials is so reflective sometimes of what we were actually feeling as we worked. And so this is composed from distressed and reclaimed textiles, stitch, and she also says emotions. The dark distressed fibers helped me express and work through a difficult time in life. And so we want to remember that we can keep these processes close at hand, because sometimes therapy is great and sometimes stitching is better. From Kristen Rohr, Taurus Moon. She has a loose approach to her stitching, which is characteristic of many of the pieces that she creates. And this is another example, beautiful, beautiful example of earth and water elements. And this is a chance, making this piece was a chance to reflect on the meaning of the moon in Taurus in her birth chart. Kirsten Engstrom, this particular piece is one of the ones that graces our cover. She lives in Sweden in the countryside and has had all kinds of experiences, including bookbinding, traditional and contemporary, writing, a love of books and words and letters, obviously fine watercolor, and mentioned in her statement that in a piece like this, someone can read the text if they'd like to, but it's not an absolute. And I pulled it closer so that I could read the text because I wanted the full story. And it turns out that it is a tribute to, I think, the dog in the sweetest of ways. And so when you have a chance to look at this and pull it closer yourselves, you may enjoy reading the text that she's included. And Unconditional Love is exactly the right title based on not only the image, but also the text. Karen Sophia Smith, I'm in a small group with her, and she went round and round about this piece and had some real doubts about it. And she mentions that in the statement that she had an urge to put it in the trash, but she stuck with it and thought about it and reevaluated it and came out the other side realizing that this was actually her and that the message was, I love life. And so here we have this beautiful feminine creature with her arms wide open, ready to embrace whatever may come. And from Karen McCann, Karen combines stitching and assemblage like this with her photographs in a very effective and poetic way, and said in her statement that she's happiest when the dance between the two is attained, because that's when it makes her heart sing. And this is a hometown nature collage, and so we can guess that each of those photos has personal significance and falls close to home for Karen. And Karen Henley, I'm so glad that Karen Henley decided at the last minute to include this, because we don't have a lot of garments, and this is absolutely delightful. The center panel you see there on the left, that is hand embroidery, and you see how she's incorporated it into the commercial fabric in the dress on the right. And each of us should have a special peachy dress of some kind, or a strawberry dress, or some sort, an asparagus dress, some sort of special dress to put on to feel so good and look as good as this dress looks right now. And from Karen Collette Frank, this is a tribute. She walked a labyrinth on her 65th birthday in Dingle, Ireland, and this was a quest to discover family, if possible. And so you see here that she had Irish ancestors, and this is her maternal, I believe, paternal, mother's paternal grandmother, and the link to my unknown Irish Murphy ancestors. And so the color alludes to that. The photograph is obvious. But what I really love is that she's included the patches on the right-hand side that are a reference to grandmother's flower garden. It's a really smart, great thing to have done there, Karen. From Joyce Martelli, I love this Where Am I? And the stitching on the piece is self-explanatory in many ways. And you've all been there, we've all been there. I'm lost and have gone to find myself. If I return before I get back, please have me wait. And then she says in her statement, she's reconsidering past roles and figuring out what comes next. And I think many of us are on that path, and she's wishing you well, and we wish her well. And from Jeanette Floyd, a beautiful non-representational piece that actually has a very deep message, because this represents conversations she had with her mother before her mother's death. Her mother was a profound Christian and looked forward to seeing Jesus. And Jeanette wrote that the Apostle Paul's words, "We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair. We rejoice, we are not crushed, despairing, forsaken, or destroyed." And what a beautiful message that she was able to share with her mother before her mother's passing. And the delightful drawing from Jan Glisson of her granddaughter, Audrey Jane. The good news is that Audrey Jane, pardon me, turned 11 in October and was gifted with this piece, which now hangs in her bedroom. And I heard recently, or maybe I saw it on Facebook, that she was delighted to see herself in the catalog when her grandmother showed her the Amazon copy that she had purchased. So don't you love it when it goes full circle? And what a beautiful drawing, and what a beautiful set of eyes that little girl has. From Janice Updike Walker, The Guardian. Janice is known for working with vintage fabrics and stitching, and has been featuring the symbolic language of archetypes in her work as they relate to her personality. This one, this Guardian gorgeous parasol, represents a mandala of the archetypes, and each of these is a protector in some way for her. And we're hoping that maybe over time we'll get more of a story about this particular piece, because there's obviously a great deal to know from considering it and contemplating the words that are included and the beautiful stitching. Janet Darcher, also from the catalog, and this is her grandchildren. This piece was a result of work done in the CST topical group Digital Cloth, led by Jane Godshaw. Thank you, Jane. And this was Janet's an early foray into photo manipulation. And I just want to point out how effectively she stitched the little boy's face on the right in that detail, because look at how that is inspired by the mosaic in the rest of the picture. I just think that's really, really smart quilting. Good for you. Let me get a little drink. Pardon me. And from Jane Jennings, this lyrical, haunting were words that came to my mind when I looked at the work for the very first time. These are layers of silk organza, hand painted and printed, or digitally layered images that she prints and assembles in the studio. And she's done a gorgeous job of creating this very poetic surface that is an homage to the sanctity of water. And from Jan Gauvain, this is The Saboteur. Jan lives in Wimberley, not far from where I live, and has been picking up bones for a number of years, some of which came together in this particular sculpture. And she points out that her hope in making this is that the saboteur, which of course is about choice, is about what we do to ourselves and what we allow others to do to us that shut down our creative process. And so her hope was that by creating this piece and showing it, she would encourage the rest of us to delve deeper into the forces that drive our lives. From Jackie Manley, a very prim and proper and strong, independent woman. This represents her Jackie's warrior, but it's actually her great aunt Carrie, who went from fancy streets in France, I'm the one characterizing there, to a farm where she and her husband cared for land and beasts with the same strength and joy she embodied when she was all dressed up and ready to go out. That is someone with a great deal of fortitude. From Ileana Soto, a piece that references several different things. She participated in Beth Salvia's collage group. One of the prompts that they followed was the word stone. And she went back to this fabric, which had been printed in 2019, and sees this as a fairly abstract representation of stone tiles of an ancient Roman ruin, but then goes on to think about earthquakes, the shaking of the earth, floating irregular shards, and what might be found underneath. So the boundaries of reality are actually blurred. Is it an earthquake or the rolling tremors of war? And from Ellen, what I loved so much about your statement, Ellen, is that the love of quilt making just comes flying out of your statement. She references seeing the recipients of quilts that she had made move into nursing homes and then take the quilts with them. And then thinking about quilts that she's gifted other people, and closes by saying she's always creating quilts. It's the meditation, the personal therapy, her creative life, and it keeps her mind and her body engaged. And how fortunate would any one of us be to have that kind of a creative path to return to over and over again as a way of finding a calm center in ourselves. From Ellie Zimmer, an absolutely delightful pastel that totally captures this personality. I want to sit on the sunny deck and get to know both of you better, but I do think it does depict a very joyful and engaging personality, and it takes a certain kind of sensitive artist to be able to capture that. And from Diana Frazier, she started hand sewing at the age of 12. Many of us did, I guess. And now she has decided, after years of volunteering, that she would put her time into pursuing her love of art. And so this is a piece called Three Sisters, and it is a mixed media piece. She says, I have a hard time focusing, but you know, people who have the, it's escaping me right now, the dilettante It's perfectly okay to jump from shiny object to shiny object. That's part of who you are, and no one should ever try to take that away from you. And so this incorporates wallpaper and beads and paper napkins and photos, and it's charming. Christine Barker has been exploring archetypes and created this piece on a transatlantic flight. And what a powerful Arctic fox this is, just based on the gaze. She chose it because it's more playful than some of the other foxes, and mentioned how much it meant to her to stitch this watchful, stimulating presence. And what a beautiful job you did. Carla White grew up in Vermont and played, which I found really kind of ironic, on Texas Hill in Vermont. And here she has captured Texas Hill, where they did all kinds of things over the course of the changing seasons. And Carla, it's a fabulous, gorgeous piece in terms of the colors that you've combined, but that sky is a total knockout. And from Bobby Benson, Conversations in a Crowded Room, this is the perfect representation of being in, just look at that piece on the left and imagine being somewhere where there are in a restaurant, lots of conversations going on at once, and you keep picking up on snippets of this and that. And then sometimes they begin to relate to each other. So she's done a really beautiful job with the little snippets of magazine words and the thread and how it ties it all together. And if anything, it's a reminder that when there are conversations in a room like this, they are separate, and yet in some way they are universal. And that's such a great message. Beth couldn't be with us today, but this is a beautiful example of working through grief because she lost her husband suddenly, and you see that reflected in the blue at the bottom with the word loss. She has printed the words courage, strength, and resilience. I love the fact that that's the double wedding ring pattern behind this hand. And she mentioned the Helen Reddy anthem. If I have to, I can face anything. I am strong. And I'll go on to say that I believe another one of those lines is, I am invincible. And even when we don't feel that we are invincible, eventually we can uncover that, and we can certainly uncover it more easily when we have the help of a loving community around us to be supportive and to hold up the mirror that shows us that invincible face when we've forgotten that we have it. Barb Corso, this is such a delightful piece. Look carefully here. It's one you might want to blow up. She's got the same design on the computer screen that is on the wall in the room. Barb was an art quilter and then got interested in digital collage and has been working with that very effectively for 2 or 3 years. This is The Quilt Artist, and she wrote, it demonstrates my growth as a designer of themed wall hangings and emphasizes the technology as well as the craft that blends into the final composition. Beautifully done. Barb Cardinal Sorge always has something fabulous to share with us. She is multi-talented. She's a ceramic artist. That's how she got interested in all things creative. And this is a particular piece that is true of many of her pieces: mixed media, ceramic fiber, found metal. And the bird is strutting its stuff. But I really feel as though when Barb takes on these projects and her child takes over, and she says, my child within loves a surprise ending. And I think in the process of discovering that surprise ending, Barb, you strut your stuff. Barb Kaiser, beautiful piece that started from some scraps. She juxtaposed some fabric with some manipulated paper and came up with this beautiful landscape, very non-representational sort of landscape, and yet we recognize it as that. And she comments, serious play is my mode of creating, and that this is a piece that she felt referenced the sense of a desert ready to bloom after the rain. Anne Rooney, Dancing Away. As the grandmother of a 3-year-old, I can completely relate to this. Inspired by the then 3-year-old making footprints on paper. The way the footprints faded seemed to reflect her growing up and dancing away. And so this is a bittersweet piece and poignant, and yet aren't we fortunate when we're on the planet to witness not only the 3-year-old, but also the dancing away, and hopefully the return. From Anne Lee, another beautiful piece, My Heart is Full. So you can see there the beautiful embroidered heart surrounded by the butterflies, which are symbols of transformation and rebirth. And perhaps this is as much about coming back to joy and fullness and rebirth as it is about anything else. From Anne Marshall, The Power of Thought. And I was fortunate to be part of a group where Anne showed this piece as it came together for her. And it's a very powerful representation of synapses at work in that brain, and was inspired by the Peace Pilgrim, who was an activist in the 50s who walked across the country. And her thought, or her statement was, if you knew how powerful your thoughts are, you would never think a negative thought. From Alison Bainbridge, The Dryad. Allison had making a bucket list, or making a doll on her bucket list, and then was gifted hand-dyed velvet from a friend and proceeded to put this being, she's more than a doll, I think, put her together. My dryad began to take shape. She's all hand sewn. I wanted her to look otherworldly but approachable. And I think that she is exactly the sort of muse that we would all feel really fortunate to have sitting in a corner of the studio, especially when we're pondering what the next great project might be. From Al, this piece, History Reimagined. This is a family photo that has been reimagined. Eleanor Williams, my great-grandmother, is pictured in the light blue dress that says Protect Trans Kids. She has numerous descendants who are part of the LGBTQ community, including Al. And given the current barrage of anti-trans and non-binary laws, I am delighted that Al shared this piece with us, and I am delighted to highlight it now so that we all can underscore how important support is for this extremely important movement and all of the human beings who are part of it. We go in alphabetical order just because of the program that Wayne uses, and we alternate. So sometimes the Z's are first and sometimes the A's are first. And in this case, the last but not the least of the pieces that I'm sharing with you today is from Adriana G, our friend Gigi Medeiros. I think she's in transit today, so she's probably not here. Pardon me, she does all kinds of amazing work. This is someone who does not appear to sleep. And you've seen some of her embroideries and her stitching in the past. This is part of an ongoing series of photographic performance pieces that have been created with the assistance of her husband, Stevie Black, who is the most delightful human being. And she is using her own textiles and posing, and this is the Rebel, which is part of the latest group that she's been working on. And so I'm really hoping that we will see more of these. These would make a wonderful self-portrait series, or a case study perhaps next year, if I can convince her to consider doing that. So congratulations to everyone who contributed work this time around. I want to remind you that not everyone had the time or the inclination to share something. So if you're watching this and you're not part of the CST community, this just is a fabulous example of all of the work that is being created by our membership all the time. Everyone was able to enter this exhibition if they were available and had the work. Some people, as I say, chose not to. We do make these exhibitions completely inclusive, and they are not juried because it's so important to me that everyone have an opportunity to share the work they're working on at any particular point in time, whether it's in vogue or whether it's the latest hot thing that's happening. What I care most about is that people do the work that is meaningful to them and that they have a place to share that if sharing it is part of what they feel is important for them and what they would like to do.